on our ever-changing world. Actually, I wanted to say something before we begin. So the last video that I published, which was an update on Evergreen, I spoke about 3 stories. I spoke about the John Baumonk investigation, how much money that cost. I spoke about the perspective or the speculative numbers of student enrollment. And then I spoke about a protest that happened last year. And I made a terrible error. And actually in the video, I kind of reprimanded the internet and all of us who are participating in the news. I reprimanded us for, taking facts before they're actually facts and then shoving them out there, and then they get pinged around and pinged around and pinged around. And I challenged us, or I urged us to look at patterns with perspective and patience. And then what I did, I turned around and I made a connection between a protest and a specific teacher who was new to the college. And I made a very loose connection, and I called her out by name, and then I didn't even think about this, and yet I'm not dodging responsibility. I put her contact information up on the screen. Since then, I've scrubbed that out of there. But I was acting naively, because my point in bringing up that specific teacher who has a history of teaching intersectionality stuff and systems of oppression stuff, I just wanted to make a connection between Evergreen and the larger academic community of what occurs when we focus on oppression, when we adulate and in effect, fetishize the marginalized, and how that will have a certain result over and over and over again. Instead of making that point, I made a very loose connection, and I believe that she received some harassment due to my reporting. And I don't want to partake of any of that harassment. I don't want to have anything to do with any of that harassment. And yet, you'll see me from time to time be mocking, be somewhat of a bully, be kind of harsh, and, stray from the straight and narrow professional path. So I wanted to call myself out on that and renew my effort to be a better reporter of this. Now, that said, let's talk about this brand new student handbook put out by Evergreen for the brand new students that are coming in this year. And I went through and I reviewed this handbook, and I have to say that by and large, it's a very solid document. They put a lot of work, and it really shows, because they inform the students of the very particular system of Evergreen education. That particular system of the Evergreen education doesn't necessarily have to do with what Evergreen is now known for. It doesn't really have to do with protests. It doesn't necessarily have to do with intersectionality, diversity, social justice. It doesn't have to be that way. I found my time at Evergreen to be immensely fulfilling, immensely rewarding, and I got a lot out of it, with a cherry on the top of a huge story to tell after I spent 4.5 years learning how to tell very complex stories. So, that being said, there are some interesting bits to this, and namely 1 or 2 things that I want to call out. First of all, let's just say that it's kind of interesting that this the Evergreen marketing department, or their strategy, is being very consistently implemented, where we have these students looking upward, looking toward the future. And the kind of the thing that we can say is that they want us to look toward the future, because in the immediate past of Evergreen is a whole bunch of muck that they still haven't dealt with, but it's still here. That muck that caused the protest is still here. It's just cloaked in a very silly name now. Anyway, so they're looking up to their degree as if it's manna from heaven going to fall upon them from on high. I just think that's a little bit funny. That's repeated in the next page, where you have a student looking up, looking beyond, not looking at reality, so-called, but looking at the possible. And I believe in looking at the possible, so far as we're rooted in the actual. And I have a problem with that, as you might imagine, because of my imagination. Anyways, there's this opening statement by George Bridges, and then there is this gloss in the sense of a synopsis of what it means to participate in a liberal education. Simply put, students who complete a liberal education are well prepared to make an impact on society and in the workplace. And while Evergreen is a liberal arts school, it is also a distinctive place. When you leave Evergreen, you will be prepared to be especially collaborative. I love that. Especially collaborative. What does that mean exactly? You can do group projects? No, especially collaborative. You can survive polyamorous relationships, maybe? Or, to be really unfair, insert some especially collaborative work from the Evergreen students in 2017.
These racist teachers have got to go, hey!
Anyways, when you leave Evergreen, you will be prepared to be especially collaborative, you will have strong written and oral communication skills, and you will be flexible in exploring new and creative ways to solve problems and probably create them. You will have breadth, viewing the world from a variety of different perspectives, and depth, from focusing on areas that will prepare you to achieve your future goals. Whether your future plans involve the arts, sciences, humanities, YouTube, or social sciences, you will work in teams across academic disciplines to layer your education into an individual expression of scholarship. I'm glad they didn't say identity. They said scholarship. Good on them. Along with your faculty and advising staff, this guide will help you think about your education and begin the process of planning your path toward graduation and beyond. Now here is where all of my goodwill goes out the window. And yes, I have a lot of goodwill for Evergreen. I really do want Evergreen to figure out how to get through this and to actually figure out what the protest, what the whole event actually brought up, and take a really strong, hard look at what caused that. That's the whole reason I'm doing this. That's why I continue to do this, and why I will continue to do this, because I want us to see what caused the protest and what we need to be aware of when something like what led to the protest starts to happen at other institutions. Evergreen is, yeah, you're here to watch me talk about Evergreen. Yes, the particular. It's the pattern that is most important. We need to extrapolate from the data and try to see where the pattern is going to be replicated elsewhere, because it's a disastrous pattern. It's, to use a triggering word, catastrophic. Inclusive excellence. I want to say excellence. Inclusive excellence. Valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion at Evergreen. Inclusive excellence is a holistic approach to creating an equitable and inclusive learning environment that is critical to your development, learning, and success. So this inclusive excellence is very, very important. It's critical. So we go from the structure of what is a liberal arts education, then we go into the content of what is the Church of Equity. What is this Church of Equity? This approach means that it's not just one office that can do this work alone. It is the collective effort of our entire campus community to nurture and support your personal and cultural development while meeting your academic needs. Now, this is the problem that I have. Instead of focusing on your academic development and giving you the needs, like just basic human needs, food, shelter, and a social environment that's free of harassment, those are swapped out. So there's academic needs now. And then the real development that we're involved in, that Evergreen is explicitly saying is critical for us all to be involved in, the entire community, 360. A completely virtual environment that you're paying for, you're entering into. This is all geared towards supporting and nurturing your personal and cultural development. I've been going through The Coddling of the American Mind by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, and they make a case that it's not colleges that are causing the college unrest. It's actually a generational thing. The iGen or Gen Z or whatever it is that's coming into the colleges starting in 2013, they are growing up much slower, and they're actually prone to mental health problems. And they go through, in the second half of the book, they go through and they detail that. It's a very good book. You should check it out. And hopefully I'll get one of those guys on this channel at some point to dive into the Evergreen story, because they do devote a significant amount of time in the book to the Evergreen story. But colleges across the country are now focusing not primarily on academics. Academics are just there. You just do academics. What they're focusing on is personal development, is cultural development. They are taking on the responsibility of parenting the student. Now, around 25% of Evergreen is a non-traditional student. A non-traditional student is a student that is older than the average student. They start in the late 20s, their 30s. I started in my late 30s, and there's people older than me. There's people in their 40s and their 50s. And a full 25% of the Evergreen student body is actually non-traditional. It's actually older than regular. But Evergreen is still acting as though they are the nurturer and the supporter of personal and social and cultural development. So when they are given all the responsibility for personal and cultural development, then it becomes very essential for us to look into what they mean by culture, what they mean by development, and what kind of person, not even what kind of worker and what kind of academic they're producing, but what kind of person comes out of Evergreen. Now, I am somebody who came out of Evergreen, but I had already done a lot of work on myself before I went through Evergreen. And I used Evergreen to work further on myself because Evergreen potentially is a very independent-minded school. But then you have all this inclusive excellence stuff. To continue. When we practice inclusive excellence campus-wide, we work and learn in a community that embraces diversity, academic excellence, and cultural competency skills. Okay, what do you mean by cultural competency? I'm still waiting for some documents that show me exactly what they mean by cultural competency. Because I don't trust their idea of culture. They don't have a good track record at being competent with culture, not within the college and not with dealing with the wider culture of America. They're still in denial about that wider culture. And they're still prone, not everybody, but the institution as a whole is still prone to feeling victimized by that greater culture. So it doesn't seem they have competency towards cultures that are aggressively critical of their own culture. So do we trust them with this work? Inclusive excellence has several key values, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. During your academic journey at Evergreen, you will meet people who share a mosaic of life experiences, backgrounds, and perspectives at Evergreen. So are we looking at individuals, or are we looking at different collectives? That sentence is very telling. You will meet people who share a mosaic of life experiences rather than bring to bear into the classroom a mosaic of life experiences. And that goes along with what this whole diversity, equity stuff really, really is. Another way of putting it is this: Evergreen students, staff, and faculty are diverse. Okay. The American Association of Colleges and Universities defines diversity as, quote, individual differences, e.g. personality, prior knowledge, and life experiences, and group/social differences, not identities, but differences, e.g. race, ethnicity, class, gender, sexual orientation, country of origin, and ability, as well as cultural, political, religious, and other affiliations. That block of text is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You can just say differences. You will also be exposed to learning environments that embrace diversity within the curriculum to strengthen your intellectual abilities and desire to become involved in the community. That is a terrible sentence. It's a borderline run-on sentence. Let's try to break it down. You will also be exposed to learning environments that embrace diversity within the curriculum to strengthen your intellectual abilities and desire to become involved in the community. Basically, what they're trying to say is that you're going to go to these classes, and in these classes, diversity is going to be high on the list of things that they're going to teach you. And they want to teach you that so you'll get smarter, but also have a desire to become involved in the community. And that is where it sounds more and more like church. We're trying to train you not just to be smart, but to be a part of us. Not just smart, but a part of us. And to embrace this whole life design that we have designed for you on an intellectual, academic, cultural front, on a personal front, on a physical front. We are developing you when we are going to take part in every bit of you. And again, this is not specific to Evergreen. This is popping up everywhere. It's just at Evergreen, it's very apparent what they're doing and how it clashes with, the goal that one would assume a college is to be about. And maybe it's not the fault of the college that they need to be focusing on this stuff. Maybe this is what parents want their children to be learning. They want a second parent to help that child grow just a little bit further. And then the child is going to go out and look for an even bigger parent called a corporation or a government. And then we're just going to have these bigger and bigger avuncular systems that will be restraining and coddling you. Kind of like a cross between a bustier and a dog trainer. To continue, equity is also a key value of Evergreen. The AAC&U defines equity as, quote, the creation of opportunities for historically underrepresented populations to have access to and participate in educational programs that are capable of closing the achievement gaps in student success and completion. Basically, equity, whenever anybody says equity, they're talking about equality of outcomes. Equity is a value of Evergreen. So first is diversity. So we look, there's a holy trinity going on. Diversity is the Father. Diversity is looking down and judging. Diversity is the hand that comes down and writes on the wall that everything is numbered, weighed, and divided. And then equity, which is the Son, which is the New Testament, the new promise, is that those differences will be eroded. Not only is everybody different on outward characteristics, but they're different in their abilities. They're different in where they started. They're different in their wealth. They're different in all these different factors, and we are going to equalize those. We're not going to provide equality so much as we're going to provide equalization. And so, to play their game, it's not so much that some people will be given more resources than others, as some will not get as much as others, which goes to say that there will be a calculus put in place that will kind of scry your statistical likelihood to be diminished or underrepresented or marginalized, whatever word they want to use. And then we will try to make you equal with the people who we statistically think have it better off. And so they're going to use all these different rubrics that they're not going to be able to define, like privilege and all those other different intersectional things, to munch this calculus that, in my thinking, only God the Father can actually crunch that calculus. In my conception of what an actual God is doing is giving it up to us to make ourselves better, not equal to other people, but better than we were. That is the true path towards a better future. To continue, Evergreen provides programming, resources, and other support that will assist in your achievement and success, many of which are mentioned in this handbook. So again, it's not that some people will have more resources than others. It's that some will just be assumed to not need these extra resources. And these extra resources, and maybe this is just the case that certain groups should have a little extra boost, that's fine. But when it gets into the academic environment, we see it coming out. If you look at my other videos, you'll see that people are imperfect when they try to equalize outcomes. It's never just enough to give more resources. You also have to chain the people down who you see as being overrepresented in whatever it is in the contest. It's not just that you want to make the losers more likely to win. You also want to slow the winners down just a bit. That's what ends up happening. That's what always ends up happening when you deal with equality of outcomes. Either that or you just make the outcome worthless so that everybody can reach it. And that's the problem that I have with inclusive excellence. To continue. And okay, so we did the Father, we did the Son, and now here's the Holy Spirit. Inclusion is a practice that we encourage in every aspect of the college, like the Holy Ghost. It suffuses everything, like the Shekinah. It's the light of God, the power of God. It suffuses everything. Inclusion. It is defined as, quote, the active, intentional, and ongoing engagement with diversity, end quote. So you're always connected with seeing the differences between everybody else. And it's not just enough to see that, but you actually have to take some steps to close those achievement gaps, as they say, to close those differences of outcome. And so inclusion is the process of always being involved in that. And this is very culty. It's a mantle that you have to put on and see the whole world through this lens. And what's the difference between this and, say, a theory like evolutionary biology? That's a good question. What's the difference between this and the process of science, of going through and breaking down everything into these categories? Well, I think that science actually gives us better, finer ability to grasp at the roots of reality, whereas inclusion, diversity, and stuff just sends us into this nihilistic spiral of only seeing these differences and never actually being able to make that inequality equalized. So, with the practices of equity, diversity, and inclusion as principles of inclusive excellence. See, again, just like a church, there's this word that doesn't mean anything, inclusive excellence. It's like Scientology, inclusive excellence, right? Why do you need to create a new word for a set of values? What is going on there that you have to play this sleight of hand and put it, furthermore, on page 3 of your orientation, because you want everybody to be oriented through this value structure. The value structure is not rigorous work, reading your ass off, writing your ass off, really stretching yourself as a thinker, but as a person, you develop into the mold of this value system. That's what it's actually trying to do. Insofar as you take it upon yourself to develop another person's personality and their culture, you are molding that. You are manipulating that, that growth into the shape that you desire. And as a seasoned preschool teacher, I do that too. As a preschool teacher, you do that. You enforce certain laws. You enforce certain value systems. And I like to break those value systems down into very simple chunks. That's why I dislike and I distrust anything that starts to play with language like inclusive excellence, because it gets really fuzzy, and then diversity and equity and inclusion, all these funny concepts that always have to change their name because they give a bad result. Okay. Oh, I didn't even finish the sentence. With the practices of equity, diversity, and inclusion as principles of inclusive excellence, Evergreen strives to, keyword, dismantle inequities in the learning environment to ensure your success in the classroom. And who is that you? Is that all of you? Is that everyone? Because they just said that some people need more than others. Some people are underrepresented, and we're always going to be conscious of that diversity of outcome, and we're going to try to squash that diversity of outcome. And in that process, in that very process of inclusive excellence, you are separating out the people who you don't think need as much help as others. And that's fine. Maybe some people don't need as much help as others. But to put that as the core of your orientation really orients things in a problematic way. And furthermore, that you is no longer anybody reading this handbook, but some people more than others, or some people less than others. At Evergreen, we understand that inclusive excellence is a foundational part of our success as an institution. So this is their Bible. This is their 10 commandments, or their 3 commandments. When you can successfully achieve your goals, then we are fulfilling our mission as a college community. Lastly, when our college is committed to the principles of inclusive excellence, you are able to experience a stronger sense of, watch this word, belonging. Belonging. You're not here to learn, you're here to belong.
It is not about creating an intellectual space. It is not. Do you understand that? It's about creating a home here.
Which leads to a greater likelihood that you will reach your full potential both as an Evergreen student and beyond. Again, perhaps this is not just Evergreen doing this. We see other colleges doing this whole belonging thing, this whole home thing, this whole, we are the second parents now. And that's the bigger problem. Let's look at the pattern, not the particular. Though the particular is quite a sight to behold. Other than that stuff, this guide is really well done, and it gives me a lot of hope that the people who actually deserve the position of teaching young people, of getting adults ready for an adult life, are actually taking their responsibility seriously. But again, I think it comes down to leadership, and again, it comes down to George Bridges pushing this agenda that I don't believe belongs in the college. There's another little thing that I want to talk about where they talk about discrimination, hate crimes, and bias incidences. And I just want to bring it up really quickly to say that yes, there are apparatuses in place, apparati in place, apparate, whatever, you Latin freaks. There are mechanisms, let's say, in place to implement and to enforce this inclusion, this diversity, this equity. And they focus on, listen to this, a bias incident is conduct, speech, or expression that is motivated by bias based on the person's group status, which does not involve criminal behavior. So, your very mechanisms of expressing yourself will be watched, will be enforced, and we need everybody else to take part in this enforcing of these biases. And it doesn't matter if the bias is there or not, it can be implicit. The intention does not matter. It's the effect that matters. And when it goes into conduct, speech, and expression, we're talking about the realm of the person. We're talking about the subjective realm. We are talking about the emotional realm. Furthermore, the interpretive realm. So if you're teaching everybody to look out for diversity and to implement equity everywhere, and then say, and if you feel that there's a biases, contact us, what you're doing is causing people to police each other, and then you gum up the whole works, and it's no longer about academic success. It's about personal conformity. That's that. Talk to you soon.